Chief Emeka's final wish was clear. Whoever has proof of wrongdoing in this family must speak now.
Ezinne, please, whatever you think you heard, it is not what it sounds like.
What exactly are you afraid I heard?
Why is she even talking? This matter is for family.
Then let the family hear me clearly. N'abalị mbụ ikledirim, ịkpọrọ m ngwa nwere obi.
You said I understood
Nothing, so I smiled and I served food, and I wrote down every word.
Ezinne, how long?
Since I was 13, long before I ever met you, and every document she gave me has been verified. You used your language to hide betrayal. Now I will use that same language to expose it.
The day I finally opened my mouth at my father-in-law's will reading, and spoke fluent Igbo for the first time in 3 years, my husband's water glass slipped straight out of his hand. Stay with me until the end of this story, because what happened in that parlor is something you will never forget. And if you have ever been underestimated by people who claim to love you, subscribe right now. Because this story was written for you. My name in this story is Ezinne. That was not always my name, and before this story ends, you will understand exactly why the name matters. I grew up in Kaduna until I was 10 years old. Then one dry December evening, my parents' bus went off the road on the way back from a family burial in the east. I was the only one in my household who survived, because I had been left behind with a neighbor. My father's people were far away, and my mother's people were scattered. So for almost 3 years, I moved between relatives who saw me as a mouth to feed, not a child to raise. Then, when I was 13, a woman named Mama Adiz took me in. She was not my blood. She was a retired schoolteacher, a widow with no living children, running a small provisions kiosk near the motor park. And she opened her 2-room house to me, like I was the daughter she had been waiting her whole life to meet. Mama Adiz raised me the way you raise a child you intend to be proud of. She made sure I finished school. And she made sure I learned proper Igbo. Not the scattered market phrases a Kaduna child picks up, no. The deep language. The proverbs. The way elders speak in riddles that carry 2 meanings at once. The way an insult can be folded inside respectful words, so sweetly, that you don't know you've been cut until you're already bleeding. She gave me a new name the day I moved in. Ezinne. And she used to tell me, Ezinne, a person who carries 2 tongues carries 2 pairs of eyes. People will show you who they truly are, because they will believe you cannot see them. I did not know then, that this one sentence would one day dismantle an entire family. At 22, I left for Lagos with 1 bag and 1 certificate. I found work as a front desk officer at a mid-sized hotel on the island. Modest pay. Modest room. Modest dreams. That is where I met Kelechi. Kelechi Obadike was nothing like the men I grew up watching struggle. He came from money. Old Eastern money that had moved to Lagos and multiplied. His family owned Obadike Foods, a rice milling and distribution empire his late grandfather started with a single market stall in Onitsha. And his father, Chief Emeka Obadike, had grown it into something worth billions of naira. Kelechi was not loud about the wealth. That was what disarmed me. He was soft-spoken. Attentive. The kind of man who remembered that I mentioned loving roasted groundnut 3 weeks ago, and showed up with a nylon of it like it was nothing. I should have asked myself why a man like that, with senators' daughters circling his family name, would choose a girl from Kaduna with no surname worth mentioning. I should have asked. But when love is offered to someone who has spent her whole life feeling like an inconvenience, it does not invite questions. It invites gratitude. And gratitude, I would later learn, is a dangerous thing to build a marriage on. We married 14 months after we met, at the family compound in Lekki. 400 guests. Asoebi in 3 colors. Chief Emeka Obadike himself held both of my hands that night and said, "Welcome, my daughter. You are now one of us." I believed him completely. I did not yet know his other son. Ikenna was 3 years older than Kelechi. And from the very first handshake, something in his eyes was measuring me. He smiled at the wedding. He called me our wife in front of the cameras, with his arm warm around my shoulder. But some people wear a smile that never reaches behind the eyes. A smile that performs warmth, instead of feeling it. I noticed it. And I filed it away, the way you file away the smell of smoke, before you have found the fire. The first months of marriage were genuinely good. Then, about 7 months in, at a family dinner at the Lekki compound, it began. The long table was set with more food than 10 people could finish. Chief Emeka at the head. His wife, Lolo Agochi, beside him. Kelechi and I across from Ikenna and his wife, Chioma. The conversation had been in English all evening. Polite. Surface level. The way wealthy family dinners often are, a performance of harmony. Then the language shifted. And I did what I always did. I kept eating quietly. The dutiful, smiling wife from the north, who could not follow. Ikenna leaned toward my husband. And in Igbo, low enough that he believed only his brother could hear, he said, "This your Hausa wife, does she understand anything we are saying? Or is she just smiling like a statue?" And Kelechi, my Kelechi, laughed under his breath and replied, "She doesn't hear a single word. Talk freely." Ikenna grinned. Good. Because we need to discuss something before Papa signs the new shareholding papers. I kept my face soft. I kept chewing my rice like a woman thinking about nothing but the seasoning. But inside me, something shifted permanently. And it never shifted back. My husband had just told his brother, out loud, at a table I was sitting at, that I was deaf to their world. Not just deaf. Disposable enough that they didn't even lower their voices properly. They thought I was furniture, with a heartbeat. And I realized something colder underneath the insult. If they spoke this freely about company matters in front of me, what else had been said in the last 7 months, that I had simply smiled through? That night, I lay beside Kelechi, listening to his breathing slow into sleep. And I heard Mama Adi's voice. People will show you who they truly are, because they will believe you cannot see them. I had a choice. I could confront him in the morning. Watch him scramble. Watch the family recalibrate around the fact that the quiet wife understood Igbo. Or I could do something much harder. I could stay silent. Let them keep their lie. And receive in exchange something far more valuable than an apology. The truth. Unfiltered. Unguarded. Exactly as it was. I chose silence. And if you have ever had to choose between confronting a betrayal immediately, or watching quietly until you understood its full shape, drop your answer in the comments. Because that decision is harder than people think. And if this story already has you holding your breath, subscribe now. Because what I overheard in the months that followed will make your blood boil. I changed nothing on the outside. I still complimented Chioma's geli. I still helped Lolo Agochi in the kitchen. But inside, I became a recording device. Every time the table switched to Igbo, I listened with everything in me. And what I learned chilled me to the bone. Chief Emeka was sick. Not publicly sick. Privately, seriously sick. A kidney condition his doctor said gave him limited time, even with careful management. He had told no one except his lawyer and his 2 sons, sworn to secrecy, while he quietly began restructuring his will. And instead of drawing closer to their dying father, his sons had started plotting. One Saturday afternoon, I came downstairs quietly for water, and froze behind the kitchen door. On the veranda, over palm wine, my husband's voice said, Papa wants to give the Apapa mill shares to the girls too. If that happens, our control drops below 60%. He has to sign the new structure before he changes his mind. Ikenna replied, irritated, the problem is Barrister Adago. She is slowing everything down. She wants Papa completely sound of mind when he signs, or it will look manipulated if he dies soon after. So what do we do? Kelechi asked. And then Ikenna said the sentence that made the glass tremble in my hand. We get him to sign while he is still strong, before Ngozi and Uju start asking questions, and before this your wife starts dreaming that her own children will inherit anything one day. Her own children. I was not even pregnant. They were plotting against a child that did not exist. And my husband laughed. Relax, he said. She thinks we are discussing football. I stood behind that door for a full minute. Palm pressed against the cold wall, forcing my breath to stay even. The man who brought me roasted groundnut because he remembered a small thing I once said, was outside, planning how to rush his dying father's signature. How to cut his own sisters out. And how to lock any child of mine away from a single kobo of that family's wealth. Confidently. Openly. Because he believed I was too foreign and too grateful to understand. Have you ever discovered that the person closest to you carries a completely different version of you inside their head? A smaller, dumber, less human version? That discovery either breaks you, or it sharpens you into something they never saw coming. It sharpened me. I said nothing. Instead, I bought a small notebook. Dates. Times. Exact sentences in Igbo, translated underneath into English. I became, without one person in that compound realizing it, the most dangerous member of the family. Not because I had money. Because I had information. And information, in the hands of someone patient, is worth more than money. Over the next 4 months, the notebook grew heavy. I learned that Ikenna had been siphoning money from the company's haulage contracts through a phantom logistics vendor. A shell company registered under Chioma's maiden name. And that the money had quietly bought a plot and a duplex in Mitama, Abuja, that nobody in the family knew existed. I learned that my own husband knew, and was helping bury it in the books. In exchange for Ikenna's silence about something older. Something about a warehouse fire in Onitsha, 3 years earlier, before I ever met Kelechi, and an insurance payout that did not match the real inventory loss. A gap of nearly 60 million naira, that both brothers went stiff about whenever it came up. I learned that Lolo Agochi suspected her son's finances, but had no proof. And was being kept deliberately in the dark. Because, as Ikenna put it one evening, Mama will carry the matter to her sisters before the week ends. I learned that the family's 2 daughters abroad, Ngozi and Uju, were being systematically excluded from every meeting about the company's future, while both brothers assured their father that the girls had no interest in the business. Nobody had ever actually asked the girls. And I learned, again and again, casually, the way people discuss whether, exactly what they thought of me. Ikenna once told my husband, I still don't know why you didn't marry a woman with a name behind her. This one came with nothing, and brings you nothing. And Kelechi's answer haunted me for weeks. She is loyal, he said. And loyal women are easy to control. That is also worth something. Easy to control. That was my value to my own husband. Not a partner. A well-trained asset. If your chest is burning right now, the way mine burned through those dinners, take a breath. Because we are only at the middle of this story. And there is a twist coming that even I never saw. Something that connected this family to my own past, in a way that still shakes me. But first, the night I almost broke. It was Chief Emeka's 70th birthday. Canopies. A live band. Photographers from the society pages. I was standing near the small chops table with Chioma, when Kelechi and Ikenna walked past us, deep in Igbo, not realizing how close I stood. Has she said anything about children yet? Ikenna asked. She keeps asking, my husband said. I keep telling her we should wait until the business is stable. Good, Ikenna said. Because once she carries a child, it becomes harder to arrange things. If you ever need to restructure your situation. Restructure your situation. I understood perfectly. They were discussing divorce. Not because our marriage had problems. Because a childless divorce would be cleaner, for the shareholding they were building. My husband was keeping me as a contingency file, while I stood close enough to touch him. Holding a plate of puff puff. Wearing a dress he had complimented that same morning. I excused myself. Locked the bathroom door in the main house. And sat on the edge of the tub for 15 minutes, while my whole body shook with something between rage and grief. Then I stood up. Fixed my lipstick. And returned to the party, smiling. Nobody noticed a thing. That is the terrifying skill betrayal teaches you. How to perform normal, while your insides are on fire. But something changed that night. I stopped calling my silence patience. I started calling it a weapon. And I decided the blade would land where it would hurt them most. In public. In front of everyone. With no room to smooth it over. Now, the twist I promised you. About 4 months before Chief Emeka passed. I was helping Lolo Agochi sort old photo albums one quiet afternoon. We reached a faded photograph of a young Chief Emeka, standing in front of a market stall, beside a woman in a headscarf. Lolo smiled sadly. That woman sold my husband his first bags of rice on credit, she said. In Onitsha, when not one trader trusted him. He says till today that without her, there is no Obadike Foods. She later left trading and became a teacher, somewhere in the north. Something in my chest went very still. I asked, carefully, keeping my voice light, what was her name? Lolo squinted at the back of the photograph and read the faded ink. Adiz. My mama Adiz. The woman who took in a grieving 13-year-old and taught her deep Igbo, had once, decades earlier, put the first bags of rice into the hands of the man whose family I married into. The world that raised me, and the world that betrayed me, had been quietly connected long before Kelechi ever brought me groundnut. I did not yet understand why that mattered. 3 months later. I would. Chief Emeka died on a Tuesday morning. Peacefully, the way the doctors said the condition would eventually take him. The family entered the deep, elaborate mourning that wealthy families perform so well. And underneath the mourning, I watched my husband and his brother vibrate with a badly hidden anxiety. Because their plotting had not fully succeeded. The old man had gone back and forth with Barrister Adago for months, alone. And no one knew what the final papers said. The reading was set for 3 weeks after the burial. The night before, while Kelechi took calls downstairs, I sat with my notebook. 2 years of dates. Names. Amounts. Admissions. Cross-checked against public land records in Abuja, which are available, if you know which office to visit and which clerk to greet properly. Cross-checked against the timeline of the Onitsha fire. And I had done one more thing. 2 months earlier, sensing the moment was coming, I had reached out quietly to Barrister Adago. I asked her, hypothetically at first, what protection existed for someone holding documented evidence of fraud inside a family company. She explained calmly that her duty was to the estate and to Chief Emeka's true, unmanipulated wishes. And that evidence of fraud touching the estate's assets was absolutely her business. 3 weeks before Chief Emeka died, I gave her copies of everything. Her last words to me before his death were simple. Whatever happens, when the time comes, you will have your chance to speak. I will make sure of it. I did not understand what she meant until the day of the reading. And if you have made it this far, you already know something enormous is coming. Hit subscribe now, because the next few minutes, the actual reading, the moment two men learned that silence was never ignorance, is something you do not want to miss 1 second of. The reading was held in the main parlor of the Lekki compound. Barrister Adago at the head of the table, a stack of documents before her. Lolo Agochi to her right, heavy with grief. Ngozi and Uju, flown in from abroad, sitting slightly apart, the way people sit when they have spent years being made to feel like guests in their father's house. Kelechi beside me, his leg bouncing under the table. Atel I knew well. Ikenna across from us, jaw tight, eyes flicking at the documents like a man trying to read upside down. Adago read through the preliminaries. Then, she reached the company. Chief Emeka Obadike directs that the shareholding of Obadike Foods be restructured as follows. 40%, divided equally between his daughters, Ngozi and Uju, as full voting shareholders. 30%, retained by his sons, Kelechi and Ikenna, divided equally. The remaining 30%, placed into a family trust, independently managed, with all distributions contingent on an external forensic audit, confirming the company's accounts are free of material irregularities. The room went completely still. Ikenna's fork, left over from an earlier snack, clicked against his plate. Adago continued, her voice level. Furthermore, should the audit uncover fraud, embezzlement, or unauthorized diversion of company assets by any shareholder, that shareholder's entire portion is immediately forfeited and redistributed among shareholders in good standing. Ikenna's voice cracked. Why would Papa add an audit clause? That was never discussed. Adago looked at him evenly. Your father added it 4 months before he passed, after receiving information he described to me as deeply troubling. He did not tell me at the time where the information came from. He was only clear that he wanted protection. Under the table. Kelechi's hand found mine and gripped it. Not affection. Panic. The grip of a man feeling the ground move. Then Adago lifted a separate envelope, sealed with wax. There is an addendum, she said. Written by Chief Emeka in his own hand, which he instructed me to read aloud at this gathering, no matter what. She read his words. To my children, and to everyone in this room. I built this company believing the people closest to me would guard it the way I guarded it. In my final months, I learned that this trust was not deserved by everyone who carries my name. I will not name names. The truth, when it is ready, will name itself. I ask whoever holds proof of wrongdoing in this family, to come forward now, in this room, so that what was done in darkness can be settled in the light. This is my final wish. The silence pressed against my eardrums. Lolo Agochi searched every face. Ngozi and Uju exchanged the look of sisters who had suspected for years, without proof. Kelechi leaned into my ear and whispered in English. Ezinne, if you think you have heard anything at all, please. It is complicated. It is not what it sounds like. That single sentence told me everything. Some buried part of him had always wondered. Had worried. And had gambled that I was too grateful to ever act. He lost the bet. I stood up. Every eye in the parlor turned to the quiet wife who never spoke at gatherings. Adago gave me the smallest, calmest nod. The nod of a woman who had been waiting, exactly as long as I had. I began in English. I have something to say, and I need everyone to listen until I finish. Then, I switched to Igbo. Deep. Fluent. Deliberate Igbo. The Igbo of Proverbs. The Igbo Mama Ezinne spent years planting in me. The kind that leaves no room for anyone to claim I misunderstood. Kelechi's glass slipped out of his hand and rolled across the table. His skin actually changed color. Ikena's mouth fell open and stayed open. In their own language. I gave the room that first dinner, word for word. The night my husband assured his brother that I understood nothing. I gave them the veranda, the plan to rush a dying man's signature before his daughters could be included. I gave them the phantom haulage vendor registered in Chioma's maiden name, and the Mitama duplex it purchased. I gave them the birthday party, and the calm discussion of restructuring me out of the marriage before a child could complicate the shareholding. And I gave them the Onitsha warehouse fire. And the 60 million naira gap between the insurance claim and the true inventory records. The secret my husband helped bury, in exchange for his brother's silence. Then I switched back to English and faced Adago. I gave you documentation of all of this, 3 weeks before Chief Emeka passed. Dates. Written records made the same day I heard them. Land registry documents. Banking patterns. I believe that documentation answers the question in his letter. Lolo Agochi's hand was pressed over her mouth, tears running freely. Uju whispered something that sounded like grief and relief at once. Ikena found his voice first. Sharp. Cornered. She is lying. This woman has been planning to destroy this family since the day she entered it. This is exactly why I never trusted. Ikena. Adago's voice cut through, calm as still water. I have independently verified every document she provided. The land records are public. The banking discrepancies match the company's own internal ledgers, which I obtained through proper legal channels the moment her information reached me. I advise you to stop talking until your own counsel is present. Kelechi had not spoken. He was staring at me. And for the first time in 3 years, he was actually seeing me. Not the compliant wife he had built in his head. The woman beside him, who spoke his language better than half the people at that table. Finally, very quietly, in English, he asked, "How long have you understood Igbo?" I answered him honestly. "Since I was 13. Long before I ever met you." And I watched the real pain land. Not the money. The realization that every dismissive sentence, every whispered plan, every insult folded into his mother tongue across 3 years, had been heard. Understood. And written down. By the woman he called easy to control. He had not just lost his father's trust. He had lost the ability to ever know what I had or had not heard. And that uncertainty would live with him longer than any audit. Adago continued the proceedings with the same steady calm. The audit clause was triggered immediately. Both brothers' shares were frozen, pending forensic investigation. And she added, almost gently, that diverted company funds, combined with a falsified insurance claim, carried criminal exposure well beyond a family inheritance dispute. Ikena shot to his feet. "You cannot do this. This is a family matter." Adago did not blink. "Your father structured this will specifically so that family loyalty could never again be used as a shield for fraud. He anticipated this exact sentence from you. That is why he wrote the addendum himself." And then Chioma, pale and silent through everything, spoke with a shaking voice. "Ikena. The Abuja house. You told me that money came from your private trading." Watching the lie collapse inside his own marriage was its own small tragedy. Some of you are wondering if I felt guilt. Standing there, dismantling a family at the reading of a dead man's wishes. I felt many things. Vindication. A strange, hollow grief for the marriage I once believed in. But not guilt. Because I did not build that betrayal. I only refused to let it stay hidden. Everything that collapsed in that parlor was built, brick, by two men who believed contempt hidden inside a language was a safe place to keep their sins. But do not go anywhere. Because what happened after that room matters even more. And there is one final piece. The piece that ties everything back to Mama Ezinne, and to why Chief Emeka's last months unfolded exactly the way they did. The forensic audit confirmed everything in my notebook, and uncovered older diversions I had never even known about. Ikenna escaped prosecution only by a settlement that stripped his shares completely, and forced repayment that took him years. The man who once mocked me across a dinner table became, by every account, a much smaller man. In every sense. My marriage did not survive that parlor. Honestly, it had stopped being a marriage long before. I moved out within the month, into a modest flat paid for with savings I had quietly built for 2 years. Money Kelechi never knew existed. Because in his mind, I was not someone capable of planning ahead. I still think about the irony of that. And now, the last thread. Months later, Barrister Adago invited me for coffee, and told me something that rearranged the whole story in my mind. At my wedding, Chief Emeka had greeted me with a small Igbo proverb. A gentle old man's test. The kind elders used to measure a newcomer. I had answered him instinctively, correctly, in Igbo, without even registering it. Because after Mama Ezinne, the language was reflex. I forgot the moment entirely. He did not. He noticed the fluency. And he recognized what it was. The mark of a proper upbringing, under someone who knew the deep culture. Later, when my foster mother's name surfaced in an old conversation. Ezinne, the trader who once gave a young man his first rice on credit. Chief Emeka quietly, telling no one, asked around about who exactly his new daughter-in-law was, and whose hands had raised her. What he learned was that Mama Ezinne had been known her whole life for one thing above all. Honesty that could not be purchased. The same quality that made him trust her with his first debt, 50 years earlier. And around that same period, his own suspicions about his sons were beginning. 2 separate worries, that slowly, in an old man's quiet mind, braided into one idea. That the daughter-in-law his sons dismissed as furniture, might be exactly the kind of person, raised by exactly the kind of woman, who notices what others miss. And refuses to look away. Adago told me he never asked me directly. Instead, in his final months, he deliberately allowed certain conversations to happen within my hearing. He was testing a theory. And the audit clause, the sealed addendum begging whoever held proof to come forward, those were not standard precautions. They were an old man's quiet bet. Placed on me. Without either of us ever saying a word about it. He built me a platform and legal protection, for a truth he trusted me to be carrying. The man who called me my daughter at my own wedding, saw me more clearly than the son he raised. I think about Mama Ezinne all the time now. A woman with no children of her own, who took in a grieving girl and gave her not just shelter, but a second language. A second pair of eyes. A tool neither of us could have known, would one day dismantle the deceptions of a wealthy family she herself had helped build, one bag of rice at a time, 50 years before. The things people teach us out of love, quietly, patiently, with no reward in sight, often become the exact tools we need decades later, in rooms we could never have imagined standing in. I rebuilt my life. I kept my job and rose in it, partly on the strength of skills those 3 years forced into me. Patience under pressure. Attention to detail. The ability to notice patterns other people miss. I am not bitter. I am grateful for the lesson. And I carry it into every room I enter, where someone assumes, because I am quiet, that I am not paying attention. People will show you exactly who they are, the moment they believe you cannot understand them. The real question is never whether you understand. The real question is what you choose to do with that understanding. Some people use it to forgive quietly. Some use it to leave quietly. And some people, like me, wait patiently for the moment when the truth can do the most good, then speak it clearly, in the very language that was used to insult them, and watch the room change forever. So be honest with me. If you understood the language your in-laws were mocking you in, would you stay silent for 3 years like I did? Or would you have exposed them on day one? Drop your answer below. And if this story moved you, if you have ever been underestimated by people who claim to love you, or if you simply believe that quiet patience is its own kind of power, subscribe to this channel right now. Because there are more stories like mine waiting for you. And trust me, you do not want to miss what is coming next. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. It means more than you know.